Hello? Something a bit more fun. I wanted to try something a little bit different. This book of Irish folk tales. I wanted to do a bit of a reading from it because I've been quite enjoying it so far. It's got some quite interesting stories. So I figured I'd give this a go for just something a bit different because it's been a very long week. You may notice the actual bookmark's over here, but the one I'm actually going to be using for the purpose of this is this old receipt. So let's start from the introduction and the first couple of stories. Dr. Corbett, Bishop of Oxford and Norwich, lamented long ago the departure of the English fairies. In Queen Mary's time, he wrote, when Tom came home from labour, or Cis to milking rose, then merrily, merrily went their tabor, and merrily went their toes. But now, in the times of James, they have all gone, for they were of the old profession, and their songs were Ave Maries. In Ireland they are still extant, giving gifts to the kindly and plaguing the surly. Have you ever seen a fairy or such like? I asked an old man in County Sligo. I'm entirely annoyed with them, was the answer. Do the fishermen among here know anything of the mermaids? I asked a woman of a village in County Dublin. Indeed, they don't like to see them at all, she answered, for they always bring bad weather. Here is a man who believes in ghosts, said a foreign sea captain, pointing to the pile of my acquaintance. In every house over there, said the pilot, pointing to his native village of Roses, there are several. Certainly, that now old and much respected dogmatist, the spirit of the age, has in no manner made his voice heard down there. In a little while, for he has gotten a consumptive appearance of late, he will be covered over decently in his grave, and another will grow, old and much respected, in his place, and never be heard of down there, and after him another and another and another. Indeed, it is a question whether any of these personages will ever be heard of outside the newspaper offices and lecture rooms and drawing rooms and eel-pie houses of the cities, or if the spirit of the age is at any time more than a froth. That's better. At any rate, whole troops of their like will not change the Celt much. Giraldus Cambrensis found the people of the Western Islands a trifle paganish. How many gods are there? Asked the priest a little while ago of a man from the island of Innistor. There is one on Innistor, but it seems a big place, said the man, and the priest held up his hands in horror, as Giraldus had just 7 centuries before. Remember, I'm not blaming the man. It is very much better to believe in a number of gods than none at all, or to think there was only one, but he is a little sentimental and impracticable, and not constructive of the 19th century. The Celt and his cromlechs and his pillar stones, these will not change much. Indeed, it is doubtful if anybody at all changes at any time. In spite of hosts of deniers and asserters and wise men and professors, the majority still are averse to sitting down to dine with 13 at a table, or being helped to salt, or walking under a ladder, or seeing a single magpie floating his checkered tail. There are, of course, children of light, who have set their faces against all this, though even a newspaper man, if you entice him into a cemetery at midnight, will believe in phantoms, for everyone is a visionary if you scratch him deep enough. But the Celt is a visionary without scratching. Yet, be it noticed, if you are a stranger, you will not readily get ghost and fairy legends, even in a western village. You must go adroitly to work, and make friends with the children and the old men, with those who have not felt the pressure of mere daylight existence, and with those with whom it is growing less, and will altogether have taken itself off one of these days. The old women are as learned, but will not so readily be got to talk, for the fairies are very secretive, and very much resent being talked of, and are there not many stories of old women who are very nearly pinched into their graves or numbed with fairy blasts? At sea, when the nets are out and the pipes are lit, then will some ancient hoard of tales become loquacious, telling his histories to the tune of the creaking of the boats. Holy Eve night, too, is a great time, and in old days many tales were to be heard at wakes. But the priests have set faces against wakes. In the parochial survey of Ireland, it is recorded how the storytellers used to gather together of an evening, and if any had a different version from the others, they would all recite theirs and vote, and the man who had varied would have to abide by their verdict. In this way, stories have been handed down with such accuracy that the long tale of Deirdre was, in the earlier decades of this century, told almost word for word as in the very ancient MSS in the Royal Dublin Society. In one case only it varied, and then the MS was obviously wrong. A passage had been forgotten by the copyist. But this accuracy is rather in the folk and bardic tales than in the fairy legends, for these vary widely, being usually adapted to some neighbouring village or local fairy-seeking celebrity. Each county has usually some family or personage supposed to have been favoured or plagued, especially by the phantoms, as the Hacketts of Castle Hackett, Galway, who had for their ancestor a fairy, or John O'Daly of Lissadale, Sligo, who wrote Eileen Aroon, the song the Scotch have stolen and called Robin Adair, and which Handel, who lived in Dublin some time and heard it then, would sooner have written than all his oratorios and the O'Donoghue of Kerry. Round these men stories tended to group themselves, sometimes deserting more ancient heroes for the purpose. Round poets have they gathered especially, for poetry in Ireland has always been mysteriously connected with magic. These folk tales are full of simplicity and musical occurrences, for they are the literature of a class for whom every incident in the old woods of birth, love, pain, and death has cropped up unchanged for centuries, who have steeped everything in the heart, to whom everything is a symbol. They have the spade over which man has learnt from the beginning. The people of the cities have the machine, which is prose and a parvenu. They have few events. They can turn over the incidents of a long life as they sit by the fire. With us, nothing has time to gather meaning, and too many things are occurring for even a big heart to hold. It is said the most eloquent people in the world are the Arabs, who have only the bare earth of the desert, and the sky swept bare by the sun. Wisdom has alighted upon three things, because their proverb, the hand of the Chinese, the brain of the Frank, and the tongue of the Arab. This, I take it, is the meaning of that simplicity sought for much in these days by all the poets, and not to be had at any price. Yeah, you can tell this was written a long time ago, can't you, this particular intro. The most notable and typical storyteller of my acquaintance is one Paddy Flynn, a little bright-eyed old man living in a leaky one-roomed cottage of the village of B. The most gentle, i.e. fairy, place in the whole of County Sligo, he says, although others claim that honour for Drumahare or for Drumcliff. A very pious old man too. You may have some time to inspect his strange figure and ragged hair, if he happen to be in a devout humour, before he comes to the doings of the gentry. A strange devotion, old tales of Columkill and what he said to his mother. How are you today, mother? Worse. May you be worse tomorrow? And on the next day. How are you today, mother? Worse. May you be worse tomorrow. And on the next. How are you today, mother? Better, thank God. May you be better tomorrow. In which undutiful manner he will tell you Columkill inculcated cheerfulness. Then most likely he will wander off into his favourite theme, how the judge smiles alike in rewarding the good and condemning the lost to unceasing flames. Very consoling does it appear to Paddy Flynn, this melancholy and apocalyptic cheerfulness of the judge. Nor seems his old cheerfulness quite earthly, though a very palpable cheerfulness. The first time I saw him, he was cooking mushrooms for himself. The next time he was asleep under a hedge, smiling in his sleep. Assuredly, some joy not quite of this steadfast earth lightens in those eyes, swift as the eyes of a rabbit, among so many wrinkles, for Paddy Flynn is very old. A melancholy there is in the midst of their cheerfulness, a melancholy that is almost a portion of their joy, the visionary melancholy of purely instinctive natures and of all animals. In the triple solitude of age and eccentricity and partial deafness, he goes about much pestered by children. As to the reality of his fairy and spirit-seeing brothers, not all are agreed. One day we were talking of the banshee. I have seen it, he said, down there by the water, batting the river with its hands. He it was who said the fairies annoyed him. Not that the sceptic is entirely afar even from these western villages. I found him one morning as he bound his corn in the merest pocket handkerchief of a field. Very different from Paddy Flynn. Scepticism in every wrinkle of his face, and a travelled man too. A foot-long Mohawk Indian tattooed on one of his arms to evidence the matter. They who travel, says a neighbouring priest, shaking his head over him and quoting Thomas à Kempis, seldom come home wholly. I had mentioned ghosts as a sceptic. Ghosts, said he, There are no such things at all but the gentry. They stand to reason, for the devil, when he fell out of heaven, took the weak-minded ones with him, and they were put into the waste places, and that's what the gentry are. But they are getting scarce now, because the time's over, you see, and they're going back. But ghosts, no. And I'll tell you something more I don't believe in, the fire of hell. Then in a low voice, that's only invented to give the priests and the parsons something to do. Thereupon this man, so full of enlightenment, returned to his corn-binding. The various collectors of Irish folklore have, from our point of view, one great merit, and from the point of view of others, one great fault. They have made their work literature rather than science, and told us of the Irish peasantry rather than of the primitive religion of mankind, or whatever else the folklorists are on the gad after. To be considered scientists, they should have tabulated all their tales in forms like grocers' bills. Item the fairy king, item the queen. Instead of this, they have caught the very voice of the people, the very pulse of life, each giving what was most noticed in his day. Croker and Lover, full of the ideas of harum-scarum Irish gentility, saw everything humorized. The impulse of the Irish literature of their time came from a class that did not, mainly for political reasons, take the populace seriously, and imagine the country as a humorous Arcadia. Its passion, its gloom, its tragedy, they knew nothing of. What they did was not wholly false. They merely magnified an irresponsible type, found oftenest among boatmen, carmen, and gentlemen's servants, into the type of a whole nation, and created the stage Irishman. The writers of 48 and the famine combined burst their bubble. Their work had the dash as well as the shallowness of an ascendant and idle class, and in Croker it is touched everywhere with beauty, a gentle Arcadian beauty. Carleton, a peasant born, has in many of his stories, I have only been able to give a few of the slightest, more especially in his ghost stories, a much more serious way with him for all his humour. Kennedy, an old bookseller in Dublin, who seems to have had something of genuine belief in the fairies, came next in time. He has far less literary faculty, but is wonderfully accurate, giving often the very words the stories were told in. But the best book since Croker is Lady Wilde's Ancient Legends. The humour has all given way to pathos and tenderness. We have here the most innermost heart of the Celt in the moments he has grown to love through years of persecution, when cushioning himself about with dreams, and hearing fairy songs in the twilight, he ponders on the soul and on the dead. Here is the Celt, only it is the Celt dreaming. Several specimens of our fairy poetry are given. It's more like the fairy poetry of Scotland than of England. The personages of English fairy literature are merely, in most cases, mortals beautifully masquerading. Nobody ever believed in such fairies. They are romantic bubbles from Provence. Nobody ever laid new milk on their doorstep for them. As to my own part in this book, I have tried to make it representative, as far as so few pages would allow, of every kind of Irish folk faith. The reader will perhaps wonder that in all my notes I have not rationalized a single hobgoblin. I seek to shelter for the words of Socrates. Phaedrus, I should like to know, Socrates, whether the place is not somewhere here at which Boreas is said to have carried off Erythea from the banks of the Ilsus. Socrates, that is the tradition. Phaedrus, and is this the exact spot? The little stream is delightfully clear and bright. I can fancy there might be maidens playing near. Socrates, I believe the spot is not exactly here, but about a quarter of a mile lower down, where you cross the temple of Artemis, and I think that there is some sort of an altar of Boreas at the place. Phaedrus, I do not recollect, but I beseech you to tell me, Socrates, do you believe this tale? Socrates, the wise are doubtful, and I should not be singular if, like them, I also doubted. I might have a rational explanation that Erythea was playing with Pharmacia when a northern gust carried her over the neighbouring rocks, and this being the manner of her death, she was said to have been carried away by Boreas. There is a discrepancy, however, about the locality. According to another version of the story, she was taken from the Orophagus, and not from this place. Now, I quite acknowledge that these allegories are very nice, but he is not to be envied who has to invent them. Much labour and ingenuity will be required of him, and when he has once begun, he must go on and rehabilitate centaurs and chimeras dire. Gorgons and winged steeds flow in apace, and numberless other inconceivable and portentous monsters, and if he is sceptical about them, and would fain reduce them one after another to the rules of probability, this sort of crude philosophy will take up all his time. Now I have certainly not time for such inquiries. Shall I tell you why? I must first know myself. As the Delphian inscription says, to be curious about that which is not my business, while I am still in ignorance of my own self, would be ridiculous. And therefore I say farewell to all this. The common opinion is enough for me. For, as I was saying, I want to not know about this but about myself. Am I indeed a wonder more complicated and swollen with passion than the servant Typho? Or a creature of gentler and simpler sort, to whom nature has given a diviner and lowlier destiny? That introduction was written by W.B. Yeats. Next comes the introduction to the first type of story in this book, the trooping fairies. The Irish word for fairy is sheohog, a diminutive of she and banshee. Fairies are dinishi, fairy people. Who are they? Fallen angels who are not good enough to be saved, nor bad enough to be lost, said the peasantry. The gods of the earth, says the Book of Amar. The gods of pagan Ireland, say the Irish antiquarians. The Tuatha De Danann, who were no longer worshipped and fed with offerings, dwindled away in the popular imagination, and now are only a few spans high. And they will tell you, in proof, that the names of fairy chiefs are the names of old Danann heroes, and the places where they especially gather together, Danann burying places, and that the Tuatha De Danann used also to be called the Sloashi, fairy host, or Makrashi, the fairy cavalcade. On the other hand, there is much evidence to prove them fallen angels. Witness the nature of the creatures, their caprice, their way of being good to the good and evil to the evil, having every charm but conscience, consistency. Being so quickly offended that you must never speak much about them at all, and never call them anything but the gentry. Or else, Dalmaith, which in English means good people, yet so easily pleased they will do their best to keep misfortune away from you, if you leave a little milk for them on the windowsill overnight. On the whole, the popular belief tells us most about them, telling us how they fell, and yet were not lost, because their evil was wholly without malice. Are they the gods of the earth? Perhaps. Many poets and all mystic and occult writers in all ages and countries have declared that behind the visible are chains on chains of conscious beings, who are not of heaven, but of the earth, who have no inherent form, but change according to their whim, or the mind that sees them. You cannot leave through your hand without influencing and being influenced by hordes. The visible world is merely their skin. In dreams we go amongst them, and play with them, and combat with them. They are perhaps human souls in the crucible, these creatures of whim. Do not think these fairies are always little. Everything is capricious about them, even their size. They seem to take what size or shape pleases them. Their chief occupations are feasting, fighting, and making love, and playing the most beautiful music. They have only one industrious person among them, the leprechaun, the shoemaker. Perhaps they wear their shoes out with dancing. Near the village of Ballisodare is a little woman who lived among them 7 years. When she came home, she had no toes. She had danced them off. They have 3 great festivals of the year: May Eve, Midsummer Eve, November Eve. On May Eve, every 7th year, they fight all round, but mostly on the plain of Born, wherever that is, for the harvest, for the best ears of grain belong to them. An old man told me he saw them fight once. They tore the thatch of a house in the midst of it all. Had anyone else been near, they would merely have seen a great wind whirling everything into the air as it passed. When the wind makes the straws and leaves whirl as it passes, that is the fairies, and the peasantry take off their hats and say, God bless them. On Midsummer Eve, when the bonfires are lighted on every hill in honour of St. John, the fairies are at their gayest, and sometimes steal away beautiful mortals to be their brides. On November Eve they were at their gloomiest, for according to the old Gaelic reckoning, this is the first night of winter. This night they dance with the ghosts, and the púca is abroad, and witches make their spells, and girls set a table with food in the name of the devil, that the fetch of their future lover may come to the window and eat of the food. After November Eve, the blackberries are no longer wholesome, for the púca has spoiled them. When they are angry, they paralyse men and cattle with their fairy darts. When they are gay, they sing. Many a poor girl has heard them, and pined away and died for love of that singing. Plenty of the old beautiful tunes of Ireland are only their music, caught up by eavesdroppers. No wise peasant would hum the Prisigo milking the cow in the ear of fairy wrath, for they are jealous, and do not like to hear their songs on clumsy mortal lips. Carolan, the last of the Irish bards, slept on a wraith, and ever after the fairy tunes ran in his head and made him the great man he was. Do they die? Blake saw a fairy's funeral, but in Ireland we say they are immortal. Next will come a small poem called The Fairies by William Allingham. Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen. We daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men. Wee folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. Down along the rocky shores some make their home. They live on crispy pancakes of yellow tide foam. Some in the reeds of the black mountain lake, with frogs for their watchdogs, all night awake. High on a hilltop the old king sits. He is now so old and grey, he's nigh lost his wits. With a bridge of white mist, Columkill he crosses, on his stately journeys from Sleveley to Rosses, or going up with music on cold starry nights, to sup with the queen of the gay northern lights. They stole little Bridget for 7 years long. When she came down again, her friends were all gone. They took her lightly back between the night and morrow. They thought that she was fast asleep, but she was dead with sorrow. They have kept her ever since, deep within the lake, on a bed of flag leaves, watching till she wake. By the craggy hillside, through the mosses bare, they have planted thorn trees for pleasure here and there. Is a man so daring as dig them up in spite? He shall find the sharpest thorns in his bed at night. Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men. Wee folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. I hope you enjoyed this. If so, I might do other videos like this where I read through this book, because there's some really interesting stories in here. Some of them are a bit duplicated, and of course some of them have somewhat old language that's not really stood the test of time, like instead of miserly, for example, one also uses the term niggardly, which is a fairly innocent word, but, it's got connotations nowadays. So, for those kind of things, I might sort of slightly retranslate a little bit to kind of replace those words with slightly safer ones, just for the sake of it. I mean, it is oral tradition, it seems only fair. It's literally not carved in stone. It's written in ink. So, I'll see you next time I decide to do a reading of this book, because it's quite interesting so far, and there's some other interesting folk tales. Have a nice day. Goodbye. I would like to thank James Rossi for supporting me on Patreon as my Bio-Enchanted leg tier. I really hope other people can also join my Patreon to help support my channel and help improve the amount of resources I have for making better videos and being able to put more time into more elaborate thumbnails and title cards and things like that. Because I'd like to be able to have more time to really work on those kind of visual aspects beyond the actual video itself. Thank you.